Welcome to Authentic Influence Live. This is Anthony Chancemuth from Simple Creative Marketing. And today we are talking about why word of mouth and referrals will never go out of style. And I'm going to bring on our guest for this session, which is Greg Gunther, who is director and co-founder of Your Business Momentum. Craig is a business coach, and his experience as a business owner puts him in the position to be able to help small and medium business owners gain back time, freedom, and achieve real results. Greg works with business owners to help them make themselves redundant and to build businesses that investors are willing to pay top dollar for. I know Greg does a fantastic job, him and his team, because we had the fortune and the privilege of actually helping Greg with a case study for his business. And so we know the kind of impact that they're making on small business. Adding to the knowledge gained from working with businesses over the last 3 decades, Greg's role has now grown to become a certified SYSTEMologist. We've had Dave Jennings on the show twice now. So if you want to check out those episodes, you can go back and look at those. And we talk all about systems, and no doubt we'll be talking about systems with Greg because he loves them. So let's bring on Greg. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Eb. Lovely to be here.
Now, where are you? Absolutely. Where are you dialing in from?
I'm actually in Brisbane, Australia. So where the cricket is. So I've been very, very closely watching the Ashes. So.
Oh, fantastic! How are we doing?
We're actually doing really well. We're basically in the lead on the first innings at the moment. So and only 3 wickets down. So it's all looking good. Very positive.
Okay. Cool. Are you a cricketer yourself? Is that your history there?
In my younger days, I used to enjoy some cricket and certainly been an avid follower ever since. So yeah, sure.
Would you prefer the fielding, or are you more of a batter or a bowler?
You know, I enjoyed both. I used to fancy myself as a batter, but the results often used to let me down with that. So probably more on the field.
Oh, I feel you. Yeah, I wish I could be a better bowler, but sadly I'm not. All right.
Well, I understand what you're saying. Don't worry.
There you go. All right. So for those of you who are dialing in from outside of Australia, you probably have no clue what we're talking about. But cricket is our number one sport, or one of the top sports here, and you definitely have to check out a game. And we might have to get Greg to explain the rules to you one day. Now, Your Business Momentum. When did you start the business, and how did you get into the whole coaching space?
Yeah, there's a backstory to just that, Amp, on its own. But Your Business Momentum, as it exists right now, was founded in 2016. But that came as a rebrand when I brought on my now partner into the business. The business of what we're doing now had its origins back in 2007. When I sold out of my financial planning practice. My background's actually in accounting. I built that business over 17 years. So, I guess that gave me some very hands-on experience in understanding business and, all the intricacies involved in that. And, I suppose one of the things, and it only dawned on me after I sold that business in 2007, that it was actually somebody that told me, I hadn't realized that. He said, I want you to do for me what you did for yourself. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, you made yourself redundant in your business. And it was one of those little light bulb moments, like I guess I just sort of thought, well, I've been through a process of exiting my then business. But what I had done is just obviously created a business that didn't rely on me. And, that in itself became the genesis of what we do today in this business.
That's fascinating. Yeah, there's definitely coming from finances, and I've got clients who are in the finance space, and I remember talking to you about that. There's a real focus on systems, really putting that into place. And I think with you starting off in that world, it really shapes you to understand, I guess, the intricacies of, going from one, solo operator to building a team to then scaling and these sort of things. And I can see, the value in doing so. Now, the tagline for Your Business Momentum says results, not recommendations.
Yeah.
Can you tell us more about the story behind that?
Well, and I guess again, this goes back to my time when I was in the business itself. over that 17 years or so of me building that business, from a one-person practice to ending up being 25 of us all together. We employed a lot of external consultants and everything along the way. And I suppose the resonating thing with me as I was doing that was the consultants just did that. They consulted. They had all the great knowledge and, very, very wise. And there's some great wisdom and tips that came across with the process. But at the end of the day, we were still left to implement. And and often what we found ourselves doing was the execution or the implementation of that was poor. To put it mildly, it was very poor. So all of these great ideas, very few of them actually got implemented. So when we created the business, post the sale, for me, it all became about implementation. We talk about execution, the importance of execution. If you don't implement anything, then not anything changes. Nothing much changes in your business. So, in fact, if anything changes, it's probably your frustration levels continue to rise because the problems are still there and they're not going away. So, results, not recommendations, is all about making sure we don't just talk and consult. It's about how do we put that stuff, how do we get the rubber on the road, and making sure that those ideas, in fact, become a reality through action. So, we talk a lot, Amp, about change doesn't come with time, which is, sometimes what we commonly think. Change doesn't come with time, it comes with action. And the reality is a lot of us don't have that sort of capability, if you like, to know what action it is that we need to take that's going to get the ideas into reality. So that's where that comes from.
That's really intriguing. And why do you think that is, Greg? Why do we focus, I guess, not so much on results, or not? Why are we so unclear about what actions we need to be taking to produce the result?
Yeah, and I think I have a theory on that, Amp. I feel like we're successful, like we go into business in the first instance because we have a passion, we're good at what we do, and effectively we start the ball rolling and we build and we become successful at that. It's through our own success, though, that what happens is we reach the limit of our own capabilities because most of our capabilities are centered around the actual profession or the service or the delivery of what we do with our skills. They're centered around that. But what happens as we become successful is we start introducing people into our equation. So we employ people, for example. It could be that we've got more customers coming on board. So we have the mix of more customers and potentially different complaints and things coming through. Systems and processes are a big one because people in those instances still have a lot of their systems and their processes sitting in their head. So what that does is it means that once you start to put that under a lot of pressure and you're pushing more stuff through that and having more people, it doesn't get a consistent result. It creates a lot of pressure. So I feel like what happens is owners in their businesses, through their own success, the victim of their own success, actually hit the limit of their capabilities. And this is where we start to, and we need to think about what external help can I bring on? What are the skills that I'm missing that I could potentially employ and outsource to help me, plug that gap, if you like, that's going to help take that forward. So, and that's when results come. Like, a lot of people are happy to recommend, and they probably are giving you the right recommendations, to be truthful. But it's getting the results and putting those things into action that is where you'll get. And I don't feel like a lot of people do it because they're busy and they probably don't have the capability. They'll always default to what they know, and these things are a little bit outside that skill set.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said about finding the discomfort in the process and then leaning into that rather than saying, okay, well, I'm just great at doing this one thing or these couple of things, and then avoiding the growth opportunity, which is really, okay, like you say, do we find and attract the right talent or skill sets into the business? Do we outsource it to someone else who can do it for us? Or maybe it's a systems and automation issue, and we can find tools and products that can do that for us.
You're touching on a few pets of mine there, Amp, because I think in essence, I think one of the positives that's come out of this last couple of years, it's been a really difficult time, let's face it, and a lot of businesses unfortunately haven't survived. But one of the things that for me that comes through in all of this, it's helped us understand what's important. So if I'm trying to put a positive spin on things, I think a lot of people are now getting to reach back to their roots and sort of say, you know what, I should just stick to my knitting. I know these are my strengths, so maybe I should stick with that. And some of these other things that I've tried to do for myself in the past, maybe I shouldn't be doing those because I'm probably not doing it very well anyway. What it will do is it frees us up. We're starting to really get back in touch with what's important and where we get most of our satisfaction. So, and you talk about automating systems, and that's a whole different topic, but and very passionate around a lot of that stuff too.
Yeah, we'll might have to do a second session around automation because I think there's a whole dialogue we can go into there. I'd like to talk about just the growth of your business. You're big on referrals. Obviously, that's the topic of the day.
Yes.
Can you talk about just, how do you go about asking for a referral and what's the right way to do that without making the client feel uncomfortable?
Yeah, look, the first part of that answer really comes from knowing that you've built a very strong relationship, and strong relationships come obviously from delivering a good service. And for me, we call them 1%ers, but I place a big emphasis on the 1%ers. So the first focus always needs to be, if you're building a relationship, it needs to be a very strong and deep relationship that you've developed, usually through the demonstration of what you do. It's giving people an experience that is memorable. In terms of asking them for a referral, it doesn't get as difficult then, because you're really just asking them. Like in fact, we had a meeting just this morning with a client, and we've been with this client for several years, and they're saying they want us around for another 10. And in that conversation that we had with them, we asked them, what are the things that you're really valuing in this relationship? So that was the first part of the process of asking for a referral, because it's helping us understand, the sort of things that they're valuing. It's a fairly easy transition then to go to the next phase of it and say, well, in your circle, like there must be a lot of other people who would have similar sorts of issues that they're struggling with right now. Are there any of those that you feel would value from what we're doing for them? And would you mind? And we asked them in this same thing for an introduction. So they did have somebody, and they're basically going to give us an email introduction. So that's the way, in terms of getting down the logistics of how do we do that. We usually ask people to make a very soft intro through an email, from which we can create a response. There's probably one other point, Amp, that's important. We often don't ask for referrals because we're feeling perhaps a little bit apprehensive of it, but a lot of people don't refer because they often think that we're perhaps already busy, or there's probably this sort of perception that they've got that if I refer somebody, it's going to make them more busy, and will that impact on me? So I've always found when we get around to referrals, it's important to make it very clear to people that the success of our business, this is how I usually frame it up, the success of our business is no different to yours. We have to grow, and we need to make sure that we've got a healthy growth. You're an ideal client. We really enjoy working with you, and if we had more like you in our circle, we will all be successful. So it just helps them understand that we're a business too, because they tend not to think, they often think of things from their perspective, but it's important for them to understand that we're also a business, and we also need to be successful, just like them.
Absolutely. It's a really good point you make about assumptions we make about clients and whatnot, and assumptions they make about us. Like they might say, Greg's doing a fantastic job, it looks like business is going well, but they don't really know what's going on in the background, like we don't know what's going on for them. So it's always nice to have regular check-ins and just make the request. Now do you, being that you're the systems guy, do you have a system, or have you got any tips on how to systemize the act of asking for referrals?
Yeah, we do, and they've got a number of different levels, Amp, but probably the first one that I would just share is that we have what we call a nurture program, and that is systemized. So, and we put people onto the nurture program where we want to have a regular point of contact with them, and depending on the level of the relationship would determine the frequency of that. But the nurture program, it can take the form of a phone call. It can take the form of a piece of informative information that's relative to them. So it's perhaps a little bit of news that we've picked up somewhere that we know would be of value. So it can be just a little handwritten note, or an email attachment, just saying to them, we thought this might be of interest to you. It could take the form of a meeting, that's a face-to-face, and when we can do face-to-face. In the virtual world, obviously, it might take the form of a call. I call that sort of program being in circulation. I think this is something I've had a belief around for a long time, that if we start to hide ourselves, you're not in circulation, and people are not going to see or hear you or anything like that. And at first, I remember the occasion this first came to me, because when I had my practice, I used to make a point of getting out at lunchtime and just going for a walk, just to get some fresh air, because you imagine sitting behind a desk in an office all day. So I used to go for a walk. The number of times that when I went out for that walk that I ran into people, didn't result in business necessarily straight up, but I ran into people, and you got in a conversation with those people, and invariably there was something that came up that could potentially lead to a referral down the track. So we've tried to now set that up in a virtual world, where we've got this nurture program where it's actually calendarized, and people have points of contact. Looks very random from their perspective, and from their point of view, it's just they're getting a piece of information or a contact from us. But we get a lot from that. I get a lot of appointments from that app. When that happens, we pick up a lot of appointments. So that's one part. I guess the other part of our sort of referral type program is it's knowing when in the relationship to ask, and there's no right or wrong time for that. I have actually asked for a referral early in the piece. So if they've had a good experience, and there's been a high point, for example, or there's been an actual piece of information come back that is signaling that it's been a good experience, I wouldn't be shy to sort of say, look, if you found this to be a good experience, would you mind, or do you know of people who might also share with that, or would benefit from that? So in our system, it's basically training people, because a lot of this is a little bit skill based, rather than necessarily systemized, but it's training people to be listening out for, and probably asking the right questions as well, to listen for some of those opportunities as they arise. So it could come at the end of an engagement, if there is a closure of the engagement, and it's been a good engagement. Put it into your system that in your check off, you're signing off, that is one of the questions in the checklist that gets asked, so that people get to understand that it's part of our process to ask for a referral.
Yeah, I really like those two different pieces of process, I guess, you have there. I think you also call them you call trigger moments is one of the sort of phrases that you utilize. And I like I know the end of the engagement, because that's usually something that we set up for our clients is, once you complete a job or if you're coaching and they complete a certain time period, you might then say, we'd just like to get your feedback. Could be an NPS survey that you send out. It could be whatever it might be. And at that point, obviously, they're giving you, hey, we loved your work. We love what you did. Here are our results. And it's very positive. Then you can go back and say, well, hey, is there anyone else that might want to work with us? Or can you introduce us to? So I think it's their timing. What I really like what you said just then, Greg, was that you don't have to wait till the end of the engagement. Right? No. There are periods where where something is, the relationship is going well, like you're happy, right? They're happy, and then it's if you're having a wonderful experience, can you introduce us to a couple of friends or whatever it may be? Like that's really natural, and it's interesting that we do that outside of the world of business. All right, so I've got this party going on, or I've got this happening. Do you want to invite a mate over? We don't have that in the business world necessarily. Right? No,
we don't. And you actually raised NPS, Net Promoter Score. That's a great tool if people are using that, and if they're not, have a look at it and consider it, because it's a really great tool, because it's going to give you a grade out of 10. And it doesn't matter what score comes back. There's a reason for you to contact. So, if it's what they call a detractor, which is giving you a less than 7 result, absolutely you want to be onto them very quickly, because that's probably not going to be a referral. They're going to be giving us some very bad mouthing potentially out there, and they tend to be a bit more vocal as well. But if it's a 7 or an 8, there's an opportunity there to contact them and say, well, what would have made that a 9 for you? What are the sort of things that would have bumped that up for you? If it's a 9 or a 10, our process is to actually ask that client for a testimonial or a review. And again, that's deepening the relationship. It's helping to have them get out there in the land where we can demonstrate a case study effectively of a good result. And this is coming from the mouths of somebody who's had an experience, much more powerful than coming from us. So we have that practice. That's part of our process as well.
Fantastic. All right. So I wanted to say welcome to the people who've just joined us live. If you have a question for Greg, we're talking about why word of mouth and referrals will never go out of style. Greg's from yourbusinessmomentum.com.au. I've just got that on the screen. So if you want to head over and learn all about the great work that Greg and his team are doing to help other business owners to systemize their businesses, and even more, there's a lot more to it than that. But certainly go check out his website, and there's a bunch of resources there. Now, you mentioned case studies. Now, for me, that's a trigger word, Greg. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to pull up your website here. Let's bring it up. And we're going to look at your client success page. You have this page that you and the team have been building out, which is your business coach reviews and client stories.
Yes.
And, you've got some fantastic stories here from various clients you've worked with over the years. So can you just talk about why you feel case studies are powerful? You mentioned that they're really great as an entry point into asking for a referral. But I'm just curious about your philosophy around and understanding around the importance of collecting these case studies, and why do you have them on your website?
Oh, look, this is a key plank, if I'm really going to be brutally honest. People relate to people, and more particularly, they're going to relate to a particular problem. So, the spectrum of ones you've got up here, these are all coming from people with different problems that we've helped them solve through time. So if people can go in here and they'll see a story, they're going to see a story of a journey. So the way we structure these, and if I know you're very familiar with this, it's the before, the during, and the after of an experience. So a great case study is always going to talk about it in that sort of context. So you're traveling through a journey, and it's helping people understand that these people have had a problem too, and it's that problem that we help them solve, and now this is what we're realizing. So I feel like this is a key plank in sort of capturing people's own experiences, and it's going to be more credible coming from somebody who's had an experience like the one you're showing there right now. That's a client that we've been working with now for probably 2 or 3 years now. And that's another one that's going to continue on for quite some time because of all of the different things we're doing in there. But this particular client, it was very client-centric, very centered around Simon, and exactly what nothing really happened without Simon's involvement. So and what that creates is a sort of a hierarchy where everything sort of comes back to the center of the owner. And this business actually is very successful, and employs over 30 people, but he had really was struggling. Like, he was working very long hours in the week, had no real structure around how he attracted, retained the good people. There was very little systems in this business, and basically through the course of time, we've been able to slowly but surely chip away at a lot of those things, to the point now where Simon is very much on his business, just working on his business, and he's now got time to spend working directly with and mentoring people who work under him or in the business with him. Create a great culture. We've seen this culture shift in the business through the course of that time as well, simply because he's now got more time to spend directly with his team and do more mentoring with them as well. So this is a really good case study, actually.
Yeah, this was an amazing story, and I remember having the chat with Simon about just how
that's right.
the the work that you and Josh had done with the dashboard and really getting him and his team the visibility they needed to understand what was going on, what was working, what wasn't working, how to improve, and that's the thing, right? Like, you assume that a business that's been successful like his, that's been running for I think it's decades, you assume that they know what's going on. Like, you assume that it's multiple locations and we're on the ball. But here is someone that's saying, well, actually, I wish I had better visibility. I wish I had the tools that gave me real-time feedback to help our team members, and that's what you were able to support him with. So fantastic.
It felt like when I actually watched, and I remember you doing this one for us, it felt like it almost like, if I could have paid someone, I probably wouldn't have got a better result. But he literally was saying all the things that we would want anybody to say. It was just such an amazing thing. But it is his experience that he's now, and it's a team effort. Like, we talk about results, not recommendations. It's a team effort. Simon gets in and does this stuff. So there's such a great bunch to work with, and it's because of that he's getting the results now.
Now, I remember one of the things that this is consistent with a lot of the stories that you've got in your marketing here. Word of mouth is huge, and the power of a recommendation. Like, I had someone on earlier this morning I spoke to, and they just said, you know what, I bought someone's service 100% just from a recommendation from someone I trusted. They hadn't researched any other vendors. They really just went, and I remember Simon saying the same thing. Greg came recommended. I had a chat with Greg. I felt there was a great fit, and then we moved towards the coaching program or whatever it was that you started with. So why is it now, even though we have all these digital tools and apps and all these things we can do, that at the end of the day, I'd say 99% of businesses are still saying word of mouth is where it's at?
Look, and if I can say to you that it's 99% of the business that we do, the new business that we do, is through word of mouth referral. And look, the reason I believe is there's so much noise out there now. Like, we've got social media, we've got advertising. There's lots of different ways that we can send a reach out to people to look at us, look at me. The problem now, though, is that because it is so evident, it's so noisy, that it becomes very distrustful. People don't trust it. Like, we're all sort of saying very similar things, and we're promising everything, and it's promising things that we know are solving real problems, but there is no sort of credibility that sits behind that. How do we know that what you're saying is actually what we'll realize or what we'll experience? It's only through word of mouth that you're going to get that. So I feel like in this environment, it's become more important to have those deeper relationships and build those word of mouth relationships, because I feel like now people are looking to get some level of reference point or credibility measure around what my experience is going to be. So, and our referral rates are very high, and the conversions particularly are very high. So, we do a lot of work on LinkedIn, as you know, Amph. But, and then LinkedIn, that's about building a community. But anything that sort of comes through that source, and it's usually quite random, there is quite a deep qualification process you need to go through to see whether they're even a fit for you. Whereas a referral, they're already coming along warm, or even sometimes quite hot, because they've already been qualified for you by your referrer. The people giving you the referral have already largely qualified them for you. So the conversion on that becomes, in the high 90s, 90%. So, and that's always been our preferred pathway. But it's growing that base, if you like.
Yeah, that's brilliant. A couple of questions that came to mind as you were sharing that. One is, how do you do anything to give a thank you to the referrer?
If you mean by way of a gift, we tend to be a bit more random with that. So for us, it's a bit more personal. We will usually contact them and thank them. Sometimes we will give them something extra. So if they're a client, for example, that's referred, we'll give them something extra in terms of, and we call those the 1%ers that we've already mentioned. So we'll give them a 1%er, and by way of a thank you, making sure though that we point that out to them. So we don't want that just to seem like it's part of our normal standard way of doing business. We want them to understand that, okay, we appreciate what you've done. It's really valuable, and for that, we would just like to return the favour in some way. We've got some referrers that refer, like we've referred to, and they've sent us a bottle of wine or things like that. Yeah, it's appreciated, but we probably like to make things just a bit more personal, is our view. We have when we've got because our relationships that we build are long term with clients, the lifetime value of our clients can be very high. If we get a high quality referral that converts into a client, we have taken people out to a lunch or a dinner or something like that by way of thank you. And again, it's a much more personal touch. Again, we make the point of letting them know that this is a thank you. So that there's a connection there that they've done something, and this is our way of just saying thanks for them. To them.
I really like that, and it's very consistent with what I guess your approach around relationship building and making sure that it's for the long term. You're not incentivizing and saying, "Hey, you refer someone," and certainly you can do things like commission payments and these sort of things. But in my experience, the best referrals are the ones where money's not on the line, where it's not. That's not the incentive. It's because we just love that you do fantastic work for us, and we want to support you in that way. And when if the occasion were to arise, you would do something similar for us because you know what we do, And I think that's been, in my experience, that's worked out the best. And I've tried the other scenario where it's like, okay, can we do profit share and other sort of things, and they tend not to be sustainable.
It does muddy the waters. I think the other thing that I've found is when we do have a good referral relationship, you're often actually promoting the referrer, because there's often things that we'll identify in the process of what we're doing that we can point back to the referrer and say, look, have you chatted to such and such about this issue? You really should be. So we're actually uncovering opportunities as well for the referrer. So it's a really true collaborative relationship. And when you get people understanding that this is a mutual thing, the client is at the center of it all, and we are working here in a collaborative relationship to identify everything we need to keep this client at an optimal position, giving them the optimal result. And that'll often mean we're going to have that sort of circle of collaborators, and we'll identify those opportunities and refer them back. So accountants for us are great because we will uncover a lot of things where people haven't spoken to their accountant, and we can just point it out to them, like, have you gone back and had that conversation? You really do need to. And we're creating a little bit of extra work for the accountant as a result. So it works really mutually.
Yeah, they call that a partnership made in heaven. So you're very active in just sort of understanding small business, looking at where there are opportunities. Is there what's a trend that you're paying attention to right now, Greg, that's sort of really happening?
Like if I were to pick a trend, I'm feeling like coming out of this last couple of years, a lot of people are feeling very tired and weary. And there's been a lot of issues that have sort of, I guess, resulted as a consequence of that. So we're seeing a lot of people at a point where they're just really starting to question things. And I'd like to think that people need to have hope. So if we're looking forward into 2022, I feel like we need to basically get very clear around what it is that we're actually seeking to achieve. I've really found this disconnect that's happened between my personal goals and ambitions and the business. And many people, I feel, have become slaves to their business, and that results in this tiredness, this disillusionment, the frustration. So I think the trick for us is to start back at the personal. Like, we're doing a lot of this at the moment with people. We owners who have sort of got this sort of they're feeling a little bit underwhelmed or perhaps disillusioned. We're actually going back to the base and sort of saying, well, okay, why are we doing all this? What is it that you need? Wave your magic wand, but let's think about all of the things that you want in your life. What's the truly important things? It's a good time for us to do that, because this last couple of years has given us a good opportunity to really think about that quite deeply. So we start there, and then we start to look at the business and say, well, how well is the business matching that? Like, is it supporting that, or is it pulling you away from it? Are there things in this business that we could change that would help, bring that more into alignment? Or are we done? Are we actually done here? Have you actually outlived your business and it's time for us to think about something else? So it's a really good conversation. I think the trend for me is, and my encouragement to people, is to start to really go back to understanding what I want. What are the things that are really important for me, and really get brutally honest around that, and then weigh that up against the business and see, does the business actually help me get there, or is it actually pulling me away from it? So that's sort of some things that I'm seeing here.
Excuse me. That's a huge trend, and even outside of the entrepreneur business space, I think that's, people, we're hearing about the great resignation in the US, and a lot of employees leaving companies and just deciding, what, I don't want that career anymore, or I don't want, I don't need to be slaving away 40 hours, 60 hours a week doing this thing. And, it's not about the money. I've got it. I'm good. My family are okay. And it's not good for my mental health and my well-being, and these sort of things are coming up. So I definitely agree with you. That's a huge sort of trend at the moment.
Well, I think the other implication of what you're just talking about, because we've tended to focus on owners in this conversation so far, but I think the trend that comes from that is, as business owners, we need to start thinking about what do we need to provide. If we, as an employer, a valued employer, what are the things that we need to provide to really adapt to some of those things? Because you're exactly right. This great resignation is a real thing. I saw some stats just the other day where 38% of Australians, and the figure in the United States is 40%, are looking to leave their current workplace in the next 12 months. That's a huge exodus. They haven't done it to this point because they've wanted the security of the income because of what's been going on. So they haven't actually been looking, but now they are looking. And if we're in the marketplace looking for new people to come and join us, it's a really, really good time for us to be thinking about that. But make sure that the offer that we're putting together is conducive or attractive, that accommodates some of these things like flexibility and a bit of balance and things like that in it. It's not all about money now. That's the opportunity here. It's not all about money. People are making choices for other reasons.
And I'm sure you've come across some of those stats that talk about Generation Z or whatever, the youngest generation out there in the workforce, and they're driven by purpose and they're driven by meaningful work and not so much about the dollars. It's assumed the dollars are there, but we also want to make sure that if we're gonna be there 40 hours a week, that I'm doing something that's going to contribute in a positive way to environment, to my family, to culture, whatever it may be, which is really fascinating. Yeah, 100%. We're going to wrap up the chat. I love talking to you, Greg. I think you've made some really good points about just what's happening in the market, about the power of relationship. Is there a resource, or whether it's a book, a podcast, a documentary, anything that would be helpful for someone listening to this and they want to get more into that the word of systemization, and always either systemization, because that's one area that you specialize in, or the other would be around that word of mouth and building better relationships with your clients and your partners?
Yeah, so I think you've already featured Dave on your podcast here before, but on the live. But certainly have a look at SYSTEMology, because that's a great little resource to help us understand the structure and how to systemize your business. That's a big part of it. I think a lot of the other stuff, there is a book that's one of my favorites, and it's around leadership, but it's leadership and self-deception is is the name of the book. It's written by the Arbinger Group. But basically, leadership and self-deception is all about how I'm showing up and the sort of results of what that creates when I show up in a certain way. And it helps us understand the importance of taking responsibility. And I feel like for me, that was one of the grounding books that I encourage a lot of my people to read. It's not a difficult read. It's quite an easy one to read, but it just helps us really, I think, ground ourselves. I think sometimes we become a little bit, I don't know what the right word is, disillusioned, but a lot of us don't demonstrate good leadership skills. And certainly when we get into what I call a scarcity mindset, we panic, and that creates more tension and pressure. What we need now is leadership. We need people who are creating a vision and a purpose behind the vision, and putting some plans into place to make all of that happen. And that all comes from good leadership. So that's for me is a skill set that people should be developing. Again, we had a meeting with a client this morning, and we're talking about some of this stuff, and they're looking at this next generation of their business. So they're sort of looking at their leadership team. And we sort of we coined the phrase, and it is actually a book by I forget the name of the author now, but it's called Leaders Made Here. It's a great book too. And we talked to this business that we were working with this morning about the importance of them having this sort of legacy that they're creating through their next generation of their leaders. So a lot of us that are in business should be thinking about the legacy that we're leaving, and making sure that we're putting the right resourcing and training and time, mentoring into the people that we should be, to help create that legacy through good leadership. So.
Fantastic recommendations. We'll link those up and link those to the show notes for those of you listening on the podcast. I think that conversation around leadership is a timely one. I think you're right. We're looking at just what's going on with the pandemic. We just went through an election last weekend here in New South Wales, and in deciding who are the best leaders for our towns, our country. These sort of things are going on, and we're looking for examples of what does great leadership look like, within companies, within community groups, within government, right? So, and I think we all have. If there's one thing I would take away from the pandemic, it's looking at your own personal leadership,
Yes.
and how do you, like what you said before, these conversations you're having now with clients and people around, well, why are you doing it? Like, what's the real motivation, and what's the opportunity here for you to really step into that power? Fantastic, Greg. Final question for you is related to all of this: is just what's one thing that you do for your own mental well-being?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for me, there's a couple of things I do. One is I'm a regular meditator, so I try and find at least 20 to 30 minutes a day to do some meditation. Reality is that probably doesn't end up being every day, but I try and at least hit the 4 to 5 meditations a week. I do some yoga. I also have a personal trainer that I train with 3 times a week. So I'm doing a lot of physical exercise as well to help me, basically keep myself energetic and fit and energized. It's basically for me and has been part of my life for many years now, because I think you're touching on a really important point actually. We do need to take the time and investing in ourselves in those ways, and they're the things that work for me. Not everybody's cup of tea, but they're the things that I do for me.
Great suggestions. I think getting into the body, connecting to the spirit, these are all things that don't require too much. They don't cost a lot of money. They don't.
That's right.
Time is probably the one thing that you want to delegate to that. But certainly to operate, the research is there. To operate at your optimum requires, putting effort and time and presence into self, and your body is a big part of that in your mind. So yeah. Greg, I wanted to say thank you so much for joining us today. It's been wonderful talking to you. I always enjoy our conversations.
Thanks, yeah.
Again, for those who are listening, just head over to yourbusinessmomentum.com.au. Check out what Greg and his team are doing. If you're looking for a business coach or a mentor or someone who can actually guide your business to scale, and I'm sure you probably worked with some clients to exit as well.
Yes.
That's certainly what Greg and his team can specialize in. Thank you so much, Greg, for your time. Any last words for our listeners?
Look, I'd probably finish with what I started with. Change doesn't come with time, it comes with action. So just remember that. And so if you're wanting to make some change in your business, identify what actions I need to take. And don't try and bite off more than I can chew. It's probably the other little piece of advice I would give with that. You don't eat an elephant in one sitting. We take small bites. So we need to prioritize the first things first, using the Stephen Covey analogies of 7 habits. Deal with the most important, and then just progress your way through. It's a journey. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. So we need to stay the course.
Absolutely love it. And a great message to wrap up the year with, because we are in December.
Yeah.
And for those going into reflection mode and thinking about what to do in 2022, start with those tips that Greg has given us. Thanks again, Greg. We'll talk to you real soon. For everyone listening, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks. Love it, Ant. Thank you.